Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of our side streams. My name is Matt Bergenoff. For those of you who've never, who are new to the stream, we did take a little bit of a hiatus last month. We did only one stream, and then we kind of took a break for the summer because we had stuff happening. But I want to thank you for coming back and tuning back in. Today, we're going to be talking about a very important topic that's going to have obviously very several disclaimers that we're going to talk about. But I wanted to, I think that it was really important that we covered what exactly was going on and maybe try to make sense out of what some or many will say is very senseless. And I completely understand where you're coming from. Today's episode, we were planning on talking about the mental health in gaming and characters and in movies and stuff like that. But I got a message early in the morning from Hannah, and she says, we're gonna have to talk about this, right? I'm like, yeah, we really wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we just completely glossed over what's been going on for the last couple of days, or actually, let's for the last few weeks, or this whole year. It really depends on how far back you want to look. Um, so we decided to kind of scrap what we're going to do and talk about this. And I'm going to go ahead and throw out some disclaimers out there. We are looking at this through a mental health perspective. You're not going to find us talking about anything that's a politically related because that's not what our stream's about. There's plenty of probably open forums where you can talk about and put your 2 cents on this, but we're here to deliver the message through a mental health perspective, through our clinical background and experiences and our life experiences. And so that's going to be the main focus of today. But I still want to encourage everybody who is with us to talk about this situation, about the recent tragedies, about all these shootings. And we just ask that you please keep in mind and respectful. People are going to have different opinions about it, but if we don't talk about it, how can we do something about it? We are going to raise our conscious levels of understanding exactly the impact of these shootings that are happening in America. And as always, we always welcome everybody to jump in, but we have to say we're not a counseling service here. We're here to provide psychoeducation on various topics, and of course, we can't provide confidentiality in our chats. But we always welcome you to chime in and weigh in on what's going on. Hannah, go. Why don't you jump in? What do you have to say? All right, let me see. All right, give me 1 second here. Thank you. Get to found this out now. Okay, try it. Say something. Give me 1 second, folks. I'm trying out a new headset. I just threw it on because we were having issues with. All right, say something.
I'm talking
There we
now.
go. I got bars on you now, so hopefully you guys can hear
Can you
Hannah
guys now?
now.
Everybody out there.
There we go. All
Sweet,
right.
hey!
Yay for technology. It works.
Okay. So, as I was saying, is that definitely the confidentiality, we can't guarantee that, but we really are relying on people to talk to us, to give us feedback, to let us know what you want to hear from us, what questions you might have, what experiences you might have had. I know that we, like Matt said, we come with our own set of experiences. And so we kind of have our own way of looking at it, plus with the mental health perspective. But we want to know what your guys' questions are very specifically. That's why we
Yep.
decided to cover this topic, is we wanted to make sure that we are seeing what you guys want us to say, because we have our own ideas of what we want to talk about and what we think is important and what we think you guys want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, what you want to hear is way more important than that.
Yes.
So definitely those disclaimers that no confidentiality, we can't do therapy. And in that same note, I want to make sure that anybody who is on here who did not expect us to be covering this topic, you are aware that this could be triggering,
Yes.
especially if you have had
Absolutely.
any experiences in the past where you have been involved with one of the shootings that have happened, all the way back through the dawn of time. If you've ever had these experiences, this could be triggering for you. We do want to make sure that people understand that if you are having a hard time, if these types of things are starting to become triggering for you, please seek professional licensed therapy.
Yes.
Yes, Matt and I are both professionals. We both have the training, we both have the education, but we don't have the platform to help you the way that a licensed clinician in your own hometown or who you are familiar with would be able to help you. So those are things that we're going to make sure to have up on our website later. There's going to be so many links, you guys. I'm
Yep.
warning you right now. So many links.
Yep. We
So
did some research.
we've been working really hard to try to figure out just ways to support the
Mm-hmm.
community. And so, if you are having a hard time, please, please, please reach out to a crisis line, reach out to a licensed professional. If you are, we would rather not have you as a viewer right now if it's triggering for you than for you to give us a view. We love your views, obviously, but your mental health is obviously
Yes.
way, way more important.
Yes.
So if it gets triggering, please, we're not going to get offended if you say, "Hey, peace out, I gotta go."
Mm-hmm.
And then in that same idea, make sure you reach out to those who are in, who need to help you. And also, hey, if you know someone who is being affected by this, reach out to them as well.
Yep.
Let's
Check in on
let's
them.
give them love.
Yeah. Check
So
in them. See how they're doing.
yeah,
And so we always try to we have covered some pretty serious topics in the past, and we try our best to we don't want to make it quite as heavy as it can be, and this is going to be no exception. I mean, we're going to obviously interject a little bit of humor in this, and it's not because we want to have it's not that we're trying to portray as being disrespectful to the situation or anything mean like that. We just wanted to make sure that we're getting the word out there, and hopefully on a level that people are gonna be like, oh my god, this is just gonna suck to listen to this the whole time. No, we want to keep you listening, but we also want to make sure that we're talking about these important things, and that's why as soon as Hannah told me, hey Matt, we need to cover this, I'm like, dude, I don't want to, but we gotta. We absolutely have to. So
and on building on that though is also we need to have a little bit of lightness to this because you and I have to literally talk about this for the next 2 hours.
yeah.
And it takes us, I mean, we come up here and we talk about these difficult topics, but sometimes it's just as hard for us to actually deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
We are ourselves actually processing this in our own lives. And so I think that's something that's going to be good for you and I to actually talk about, is the ways we're actually dealing with it and what's going through our own heads as we're dealing with some of these tragedies. So just yeah, be prepared for that, you guys. You're gonna get some real, emotions going on here. So we got to keep it a little light when we
Yeah.
can.
So the way I want to look at this, a lot of people have tried to find different ways to analyze the current climate in America when it comes to violence, when it comes to all of this type of tragedy, and a lot of people have. It seems like there's two very polarized opinions of it, and again, we're not going to get into that part. But I look at it from a mental health perspective, and I've been thinking ever since Hannah approached me this morning about it. How can I present it to the audience that makes sense? And it's not easy. And so I actually had to go back and to my experiences of being in Iraq and as a clinician helping out veterans when it came to their traumatic experiences. And so I'm just gonna, and once again, I'm kind of, what I bring to the table is the experiences from the adult experiences, the wartime experiences, and so that's gonna be how I present it, my angle, so to speak. Hannah, how about yourself? How are you going to approach this?
Well, I have a unique perspective just having actually worked in high school settings. And so, we've had a lot of recent school shootings as well. And
Yep.
all this kind of relates. And these, yes, we're talking about the recent tragedies that we've had happen, but we're also talking about all of the tragedies that we've experienced, all of the mass shootings that we've had happen in since we were younger growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And however old you are or guarantee you to have had experiences with this. And so, what I'm hoping to kind of bring to the table is just that talking about the maybe some of our cultural side. I'm very much into cultural kind of psychology
Mm-hmm.
and looking at some of the different things that have happened. But I think the most important thing is I try to really bring in a positive, not a positive. I mean, you can't have a positive spin to mass shootings or tragedies in general, but you can have kind of this, hey, what do we do now mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has happened and this is a horrible thing, but what now? And so, I think, Matt, you're really good at kind of talking that in the moment what people are really dealing with a lot of that anger and the frustration. Is something we were talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
is just people are mad.
Yes.
People don't know what to think. They're just angry. And I'm kind of that like bubbly, hey, well, now let's find a solution. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that we can kind of eventually within this conversation get to that point.
Sure. Sure. Um, okay, so I'm going to start off with my perspective and talking about this. I've been, I've seen violence well before I joined the military. So I don't want anyone to think that, you know, everything was, hunky dory in my life. I had my first gun pulled on me when I was dropping friends off to their homes in Redwood City after work. That was the first time I ever had, and so it kind of shocked me the rawness of that, the violence or the potential violence. These two people, these two thugs, had guns and they're coming up to my vehicle, and so I was just like, wow. It took me that delayed moment to realize what was going on, to process that, and then to take off. But surely, of course, understanding the impact of war really kind of maybe reflect on what's going on today. So I'm just going to jump in there and say it. I really there's been a lifelong debate in society and philosophy. Does humanity is it inherently good, or is humanity inherently evil? And while that is a very concrete black and white perspective, um, it really kind of made me think about it. Like, when it comes to a human taking another human's life, whether it's in a battlefield or anywhere else, I'm just very curious. Like, if it was normal, all right, Hannah, if killing another person was normal, then why do we have so many problems with veterans coming back from the war, reflecting off of the violence that they were part of, either because they had to defend a position or they had to protect all of those people who were under attack. I have a hard time believing that as humans we can just easily just go up to another person, take their life without any kind of regard. So what is the flip side of that? The flip side is, well, what about the people who can? Well, then that's when we come into the mental health perspective of what's going on in that person's life. I don't recall the actual name of the shooter, the one that happened down there in
Yeah,
Dallas.
and I don't want to give the names of the shooters either, by the way, because that's something I should have mentioned to you earlier.
No, that's
I,
fine. I don't plan on.
don't.
I don't.
They get nothing from
No,
us.
no, I don't plan. I don't know
Period.
any of their names anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if you were to take a look at that person's background, like as far as their upbringing, their mental health status, it is really not hard to recognize that these people were not necessarily firing on all eight cylinders as we like to joke about. And so that becomes the mental health issue that prompts someone to take those kind of action or actions against just some innocent bystanders. So Hannah, here
It's funny you actually brought that up because this is something that I, in my own, mulling this over, I started thinking about, and I came up with a really good example that maybe might kind of resonate with some people. and maybe you just in the mental health side, is that so a good example of this is that my family, I have a lot of addiction that runs in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my family has, whether it's alcoholism or other substance abuse with drugs or whatever, addiction runs in my family. So that means that there is actually a genetic component to addiction. It's there's a whole brain chemistry. Your brain responds
Mm-hmm.
differently to substances. It makes you more addictive, easier, yada yada yada. Okay, so we'll ignore that part, but that's important. So here it is in my life, and here I am. It's that idea that you were born an addict. It means that you already have that genetic predisposition to become an addict. However, here's the big difference: is it still needs a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm not going and snorting cocaine, I'm probably not going to become addicted to cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
If I am not using alcohol as a means of coping with a stressful situation, I'm probably not going to form that habit of wanting to go to alcohol to use it as a coping mechanism in the future.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the reasons why when my friends say, "Oh, you've had a stressful day, don't you just want to go home and, relax with a glass of wine?" I say, "No, I don't."
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to do that. I doesn't mean I don't have a glass of wine every now and then, but it means that I don't use it specifically as a way to deal with my issue. And I think that when we're dealing with mental health and we're dealing with these tragedies and why people commit these violent acts, yes, there might be a mental health component. It's the same way, but we need to stop saying, "Oh, they're mentally ill and that's why they committed this act."
Mm-hmm.
No, because I can guarantee, Matt, just a question. Have you ever dealt with anxiety or depression?
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah, me too. Okay, so you and I have both dealt with mental illnesses. Have you ever had PTSD? I know I have.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so that means we have both had mental illnesses in the past. But does our mental illness, does us being mentally ill, mean we're going to go and do these things? No. And so just because somebody has a mental, maybe they're not all emotionally sound, doesn't mean that that's just why, oh, that means that they're going to go and they're going to kill people, that person has a mental illness, now they're a danger to society. No, it means that they're going to have that, but there's going to be something else in their life. There's going to be anger, there's going to be frustration, there's going to be depression about their own lives, there's going to be other stuff that's going
Mm-hmm.
to prompt this, and that's, I think, where we get that difference. And I know we have a lot
Yeah,
of
we got some really
questions.
good comments
I
coming up.
just wanted to get that thought out before we went to the comments, if Matt, you want to address those.
Sure. Strike. Very, very, very well written. The only way to fix this problem in the U.S. Via destigmatizing mental health and making it more available. Yes, I agree. That's is exactly why folks like Hannah and myself are trying to do is through these streams and talking about it, and letting people, throw in their 2 cents like you did, and I appreciate you doing that. So that we can kick the ideas around, because once we've done that here, you can run into a friend who's going to want to talk about this tragedy, and Strike, you're going to have a newer approach because maybe you picked up something from the stream from one of us or from someone in the audience who threw in an idea that resonated with you. That's exactly what we're hoping to do.
Absolutely.
Severin said, "I'm interested to see what comes of the story with the Dayton guy. From the breaking news coming out now, sounds like he was there to kill his sister." And yeah, I heard about that as well, and that's very possible. And so it goes back to the question: what motivates a person to do something like that? And back in the old days, if you were a psychology student, there was this huge debate between nature versus nurture, and it has now become to the point where both sides agree it is an influence of both. It's not just one, but a combination of both that is interwoven like a fabric in that person's behaviors and their psyche as far as what do they do. And it kind of piggybacks off of what you said, Hannah. You might have a genetic disposition towards something, but unless there is that catalyst for change, you're not, or your likelihood of partaking in that thing or doing that thing, it just might not even be there. So it doesn't become a thing. It doesn't become an issue. And if we were to sit back and analyze a lot of the mental health history of these type of folks, I would be curious to know what kind of, what kind of relationship they had at home. What kind of friendships did they have? And I remember reading an article about this person who was he was on the cusp of actually doing the whole going to a school and shooting it up because he was a student there. He was bullied. He said that he has the mindset of doing this, but because someone gave him a way out, and by a way out was just saying, "Hey, man, I know you're struggling. Don't do this." He took the way out. He felt that he was so committed that he had no choice. But when that person intervened on his behalf and saying, "You do have a choice, buddy. Let's try and do this and not go and shoot up a school," that made the whole difference for him. Hannah, what are your thoughts?
No, I actually completely agree with that. I think that a lot of times, and I'm not going to say in all situations,
No.
because unfortunately there are people who they have a strong belief in something, and there's something that goes within their values or moral system that leads to it. And I really don't want to kind of start pointing the finger at saying like specific religious organizations, but um, in every situation that maybe has a very deep indoctrinated belief system such as religion, um, sometimes there's not that way out that can happen. Sometimes that's that person's hardcore deep down belief. And what's really hard about this is that we look at these situations and we say, well, I think we all want to find out what the prevention is.
Mm-hmm.
How can we prevent this? And in some of these cases, unfortunately, there's not an easy cure. Well,
No.
and we want to say, well, it's and so I want to just go back a little bit. And so going back into my personal experience is that and you guys get your calculators out, you can do the math and figure out how old I am. I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened.
Oh,
uh,
geez.
I was a sophomore, junior in high school when Columbine happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are very real things that in a very young age, in that 17, 16, 17, 18 years old, I was kind of dealing with and getting exposed to. All of a sudden, my world just shattered over these course of these 2, 3 years of realizing that people can go and shoot a school, that people can commit large acts of terrorism, such as, a plane into a building, that thousands, hundreds, dozens of people can die because somebody decides that they want to take somebody else's life. And if you look at both those situations, there's so much stigma that starts to form around it
Mm-hmm.
because people want to make a justification of why.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the same thing when we're talking about mental illness, is that people want to say, oh, it's a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
It's the video games. We're going to get into that.
Oh, yeah.
It's the culture, it's the religion. I remember in high school when Columbine happened, it was those damn goth kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I hung out with kids like that wore the black trench coats and, were goth or ravers, and people would walk by and call them Columbine kids.
Wow.
And yeah, this is a very real reality in my junior, senior year of high school, is having to hear people refer to them as that and be afraid of them. And watching, hanging out with like my sister-in-law, and every time my sister-in-law, she had a really cool trench coat that she would wear because it had like a billion pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go flying, and she would, every time we go through the airport, because she had the trench coat on, she was automatically pulled
Oh.
aside and searched. And it was because this whole idea of Columbine kids. And so we start to get these stigmas, and it's just it, mental health, unfortunately, is one of those. It's
Yeah.
mental health, religion, it's race, it's everything. So it's something that I think we need to kind of start taking a step back. And when we start to think about the why,
Mm-hmm.
realize that sometimes there's not an answer, sometimes there's a billion answers.
Right, and we got some really good. Hannah, can you see the what's popping up in chat?
Yeah,
Uh,
I kind of can.
oh, okay.
With my chat.
Strike is kind of reinforcing what we've been talking about. How someone who has a mental illness can only get to the point where they feel the only option is to inflict harm on others if they don't feel that they have the help that they need. And Seprin said Norway has a similar gun regulations as the U.S., but it has 64 times less gun homicide rate. But Norway has universal health care, giving everyone a much easier avenue to get help with issues before turning to violence. Very, very interesting. Very interesting.
I wanna bring up though a point that because I hear that talked about a lot, and it's something that I've done a little bit of research. Is that the problem is that they also have a much smaller population with a lot less diversity,
Mm,
and in all the things we're talking about, one of the biggest catalysts for people who are going to commit these acts is hate. They hate a religion, they hate a race, they are angry because of bullying, they are yes, sometimes mental illness does play a part. They want to maybe end their own lives, and this is the one way that they can end their life is by going and committing one of these acts. I mean, there's a reason that death by suicide by police, I think,
yeah.
or I don't know the
Suicide by
actual,
cop.
is it suicide? I don't know what the actual term is,
Mm-hmm.
but I just know the principle. There's a reason that those things. Look at the Pulse nightclub that just happened a few years ago. I mean, here we have Columbine, which attributed a lot to bullying. We have 9/11, which was definitely more of a religious, cultural type of aspect. We have Pulse, which was hatred towards the LGBT community. We
Mm-hmm.
have some of the stuff that's been coming out about the El Paso was there's supposedly a manifesto against illegal immigration. Don't quote me on that. That's just one story I read. I don't know if that's been confirmed completely. So in all these situations they all have 100% different motivations, but they all have kind of a similar underlying root, which is hate. And if you're going to take a small country like Norway, or some of those countries in Europe who have these really reduced law or really reduced issues or violent crimes. I'm sorry, I am getting a little emotional talking about this, for the record. So just give me a second.
Sure.
When we're talking about that, when we have places like Norway, unfortunately, we can't say that a correlation and a causation are the same thing. So because we're working on a completely different set of government, a completely different demographic, a much smaller population, a much smaller land mass, as opposed to if we were to take maybe city by city or even state by state, we might see that there's definitely trends in where the larger amounts of these types of incidences happen.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them, if you notice, a lot of them, unfortunately, are the more heavily populated areas, or the areas where there is a lot of discord within a community versus another community, such as race or religion. A good example is just a few months ago in my own town, like literally 5 minutes or 5 miles from where I live, there was a shooting in a synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
And that was based on obviously a religious aspect. And so yeah, so I love that people are looking at what other people are doing and say, hey, how are they making it work? But
Right.
we have to make sure that when we're comparing, we have to make sure we're comparing apples to actual apples
Right.
rather than apples to grapes, because we're not going to get the same comparison then.
But at least, you know, it's at least the conversation has started, and it's really interesting. I want to bring this something up. So like everybody who has Facebook or Twitter, I have people on my friends list who I served with when I was in the military, and obviously I've got folks who are very red, very blue, and I got people who are in the middle. I'm not getting into any of that. But one thing that a person brought up was like, they're like, hey, you know, we're talking about this issue, but why don't we take a look at all the murders that are happening in Chicago? And
Yeah.
and so if after doing a little bit of digging into that, and don't get me wrong, a murder is a murder. It's horrible. I wish we can. It was never a thing in our human condition, but those were crimes of like drug related. They were crimes of gang related. They were crimes of
Domestic violence.
right, right, and so that is something that we can categorize. But when it comes to somebody who is so angry or so wrapped up in an ideology that they're going to go and indiscriminately kill all these people, to me, that's a difference. There's a difference between indiscriminately killing because of of an idea versus I am going to go and murder this drug lord because I want to be able to take his drug money and his drugs and sell it on the street for myself. To me, there's a difference. What do you think?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I like, though, that Strike actually made a comment about Norway also having less of a mental health stigma. And I just want to also address that point is that that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this is something that Matt and I have talked about a lot lately is I am 100% a believer that mental health is a huge issue in our country as far as having to deal with, stigma and stuff like that. And I think that a lot of that also, though, comes down to diversity.
Mm-hmm.
If you work in the mental health system, one of the things that you have to deal with a lot is cultural competency. I have to go through tons of training
Oh
about
yeah.
how to look at the different cultures and their different beliefs about mental health. And one of the things about America is that we have so many different races, religions, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds. I mean, everything. You want it, we have it here. And something that has kind of changed is a lot. Growing up, we kind of referred to America as a stew, where like all these flavors came together and melded. And lately, people have said, well, no, it's more of a salad where everyone kind of retains their own individuality, but adds to the greater, I don't want to say greater good because that's not what I'm thinking, but the greater salad.
Right.
Sorry, we add to the salad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the problem is that within keeping, and I'm going to say the problem, even though I don't think it's really a big problem, I love all the other cultures. If we didn't have cultural diversity, I wouldn't have like literally access to every type of food like within a 5 mile radius of my house. And so, I'm very, very happy with cultural diversity because it
Mm-hmm.
means I can have sushi or, Mexican food or carne asada fries anytime I want. So, love cultural diversity. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, when you're having cultural diversity, you're going to be bringing in also all these different cultural ideals. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at different cultures and their beliefs on mental health, I'm not going to say that these cultures are the reason we don't have what we still have stigma today. That's not the case. But we do have different ideas about what is important with mental health. And that's another thing that unfortunately or fortunately places like Norway just they don't deal with. They don't have to deal with 15 different cultural, racial, ethnic
We get you. We
words
get you.
that I can't
Yeah.
say right
Yeah.
now. They don't have to deal with all those backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
adding to stigma and beliefs and different ways that they're believing it. And again, when you're on a smaller scale, it's a little easier to bring education.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I do want to say I love that we're talking about
Oh
what
yes.
they're doing because maybe it is worth looking at what their educational system offers for mental health education and maybe schools. So things
Yeah.
like that, I think, are really important for us to start looking at as far as what we're doing and looking at some of these other countries that maybe do have
Mm-hmm.
less issues with more mental health education and seeing kind of where our correlation is there.
Let's take a look at what Strike said. Very, very. First of all, article. I want to acknowledge you in the stream. Article has. I won't call him out as far as what he's doing unless he wants to disclose that himself. Article is very much a person who has a good place in his heart and caring about what's happening in the country. Strike. He said. When everyone feels like they're on the same team, it's a lot easier to work towards an agreed upon solution. Well, there you go. It seems so simple, but it isn't. At least not right now in our country, because a lot of people feel that it's got to be either one or the other. And if you're on one side, you must have some kind of a political affiliation, and versus the other. And it really doesn't have to be that way. There's people who are very much willing to work and as a team. And that's what it really comes down to, America. We have to work as a team if we're going to make any kind of headway when it comes to these issues. And as well as suicide. Suicide is way up there when it comes to that. And the demographics of the age groups and the cohorts, we have to come together. There's no one magic cure to any of this. It's going to take a lot of talks. It's going to take a lot of action. It's going to take a lot of work on the part of everybody if we are going to make a collective change in our society. So, Strike, thank you very much for weighing in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really could not agree more. Just looking at the area that I live in Southern California, San Diego County.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody is from this area, you know that we have an incredibly diverse population down here. You can pretty much find everything. And I think what people always fail to understand is that we hear a lot of the negatives about each other. We hear a lot of the negatives about, I mean, everything. I mean, you can find a difference between any group. You can say millennials versus baby boomers. There's been a thing going around lately where millennials have been making fun of baby boomers. There is, baby boomers making fun of millennials. You have every race hating on each other race. You have every religion hating on each other's religion. And if you were to look into the area that I'm at, what you don't see is you don't see the positive. It's not going to make breaking news of Hannah went to the store today and there was no racism that happened. That's
Yeah, yeah.
but guess what? I actually did. I actually went to the store today and I'm over there in an aisle. I can't reach something on the top shelf. A very nice gentleman who just happened to be Middle Eastern comes over and says, "Hey, ma'am, do you mind if I help you out and get that for you?" And I say, "Absolutely, thank you so much." And no racism or sexism occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And so you don't hear that on a day-to-day basis of all the things that happen that are not hate. We don't hear
Mm-hmm.
about all the situations of love and kindness. We only hear about the situations where something really bad happened because somebody else didn't like another group, whether it's because of, a Columbine situation such as bullying, a 9/11 situation such as terrorism, or, the Pulse shooting or anything like that. You don't. And I love that we have a comment. Good news doesn't sell.
Yes.
And then the comment, now apply that to your mental health.
Very good. Very good. And, and it's really interesting. And I think, okay, so I remember back in the day when this was high school time. So this is many many moons ago.
Back in the 30s, right?
Yeah, I remember they're saying that Americans, and they're being generalized. They're saying Americans value independence, unlike people in other cultures. But and I'm bringing this up because it's very relevant to the topic. Um, we That's not true. If you're talking about a certain demographic, then absolutely. But if we were to take a more analytical approach, it doesn't even come close to true. So let me give you an example. At the beginning of July, I had family over, and they came out here to Washington. We had barbecues. We're celebrating the Fourth of July. We're just. And I'm gonna joke about it. We're like we were celebrating true Independence Day Mexican style. We're all Mexican, so we're just having a good time. So we're at the grocery store. We got carne asada. We got all this food. We got cerveza. We got all this stuff, and we were just talking about what it's like to wait in line at a grocery store or wherever. And this one my sister, she's like, sometimes those people who are from like the Middle East, they get really close to you, like uncomfortably close. I said, and she's like, I don't like that. I said, hey sis, you got to realize from in their culture, they don't have the same spatial distance or the comfort zones as the white Americans do. Theirs is much more closer. So it's not that they're being creepy. It's just that that's how they were raised, and that means no malice towards you or anything of that, anything like that. And she's like, I didn't think about that. I said, well, that's just it. If we can learn a little bit more about each other's cultures, sometimes stuff like this will make a little bit more sense. And when it comes to mental health, when it comes to mass shootings and why people do what they do, we can no longer be in this isolated vacuum and saying, well, why can't you be like this? Well, you need to take a step further. You got to do a little bit of homework on that. What do you think, Hannah?
I do love that article brings up that he was from El Paso, and that in his experience there's been a lot of cultural tolerance, and it is
Mm-hmm.
sad to see that one person who has this agenda would make such a statement, and with such a cause attached to it. And I think that's something that I really like that was pointed out from him, is because I think that right now, I mean, I'm not even gonna lie, over here I'm sitting there going, man, there just must be a lot of racism down there.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that, never being in that area, just being from California, that's something that I'm not aware of. I don't know what it's like there. And so I think that that's important, that we have those kind of statements to say, hey, by the way, everybody out there,
Yeah.
El Paso is apparently not a super racist area and is actually very tolerant. And this was one person. And that's what's so important here, people.
Yes.
With
Yes.
one person. And
That
that,
person
yeah,
drove over
that's
six
so true.
hours. That person drove over 6 hours in order to get to El Paso. So that
Yes.
tells you something right there. And again, article. I really appreciate you weighing in on that, man, because
Yeah.
at least in this audience and whoever's going to watch this clip later on, they're going to realize that, hey, El Paso is actually a really cool, very diverse town, very accepting. Because they don't have. You're right, Hannah. You nailed it. When I first heard about this, I'm like, what the hell? Is it like the KKK running rampant there, or something like that? But no. And so, article. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for weighing on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Strike also weighed in with, we forget that we're all Americans.
Yeah, and that's what
And
it comes down to.
I think that it also, taking it one step further, we're all humans.
Yep.
And, even if somebody is here, because, and the reason I specify that all humans is, we do have to have some sort of realization that we are a country that has a lot of immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes somebody's not going to be an American. And that doesn't mean that they are an outsider. That means that they're still human. And we all want, and I think that this is something you had touched on earlier, was this idea that we don't want to hurt each other. And
No.
I'm of more of the mind frame, and this is my humanistic side of me, my Carl Rogers education, which anybody who is not a psychology major totally didn't get that. I apologize. But it's an inside joke between Matt and I. He knows. I'm all about that people are inherently good. And that is
Mm-hmm.
something that I do truly, to the
Yes.
bottom of my heart, believe, is that
Yes.
people are inherently good. I think, though, that it takes something to get a person to go from good to bad. And I'm going to use an example, and I'm not ashamed of using this example. My mother, I've never been shy about talking about
Mm-hmm.
having been a child raised in an abusive home. And so a lot of times people go, well, how would you possibly believe that, humanity is inherently good if you were actually abused and hurt physically by your own mother? But she was also an alcoholic and a drug addict, and not that those things make it an excuse, but those things definitely brought out the worst part of her. She also had trauma in her past. She also had some mental illness things. She also was going through a lot of stuff, and she snapped. And
Mm-hmm.
again, no excuse there. It's never right to hurt your child ever. I 100% am very anti anything that has to do with domestic violence or abuse in general. Is
Mm-hmm.
never an excuse to hurt somebody in that way, whether you are, an alcoholic or not. But at the same time, there's still those catalysts that lead to it. There's still those things that it doesn't make sense. We cannot wrap our heads around it. But at least on some sort of level, we can realize that there is at least a cause. Now, if you look at my stepmom's just a psychotic wench, and she has no excuse. So yes, and I think that's so important. Is sometimes, yes, it is strictly the mental illness. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
somebody is mentally ill.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes though, it's hate. It's
Yep.
just strictly hate, or anger, or depression, something else
And,
that
and
has.
and for those of you who are just joining us right now, we're talking
Sorry.
about the recent No, that's good. We're
No,
obviously
no, we're sorry to the people that are just
yeah.
joining us right
We're
now. You
talking
expected something else.
Yeah, we're talking about the recent tragedies that's been happening in America. Trying to make a little bit of sense out of this. Of course, we're looking at it strictly from a mental health approach, but also, I guess, on a bigger scale, we're looking at the cultural influences of a person, or their the belief systems, and what would cause them to take action. And Hannah very elegantly weighed in on her ideas about the human, if we're inherently good or inherently evil, or good and bad, however you want to word it. And for those who just jumped in here, I'm going to give my 2 cents. All right. And I said it earlier in the beginning of the stream. I don't think we are wired to kill other humans. And my basis of that is off of being a therapist for several combat veterans who had to take another person's life to keep them safe. And they had to shoot and kill another person in order to protect that base or that objective. And they felt troubled when they came home. And I think that the military in itself does an excellent job of creating the instinctual firing and the warfare tactics. And that allows that person to jump over that obstacle of having to take someone's life. But at the end of the day, there still is the mental health impact of doing the actual killing. And so if I if I didn't have the evidence of my own experiences of going to Iraq and the people who I served when I was a therapist, it would be hard to say. But now it's so much clearer to me. I don't think a person who is at least of the type of mindset that we are talking about in terms of healthy, we just aren't wired to kill. We're not wired to kill other people.
Absolutely. I love that we both are reaching the same conclusions for completely different reasons. I just think that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have a comment that it's just like the natural instinct not to hurt yourself. Thank you, article. That's also a very good
Thank you.
point. That's true. Is I think that in general we want as humans to preserve life, whether it's our life or the lives of others. And I think that I'm gonna try not to get emotional as I talk about this, but for instance, looking back at the Vegas shooting that happened a while ago and the stories that started coming out about that, about people sheltering each other and protecting
Yes.
each other, I think that that's the example right there that our instinct is to protect and not
Mm-hmm.
harm, whether it's ourselves or others. And in those split moments, we do have to take that consideration of my life or theirs. And
Mm-hmm.
in some of these situations they valued the other person's life over theirs. And I think that's the natural order. I think when we're
Yeah.
seeing that, I think we're seeing the natural order of things. And I think when we're seeing these people that walk in and do these tragedies in synagogues
Mm-hmm.
and malls and concerts and everything, I think that we're seeing the outliers.
Yeah.
We're not seeing gosh, I don't want to say we're not seeing humans because they are still humans, but we're not seeing the core of humanity.
The representation, right?
Yeah, the representation.
And you nailed on a very good part. At the shootings that happened in El Paso, there was a young soldier. A young soldier was being interviewed, and he was a hero, and he's being branded as a hero. And I am 100% in agreement with that. We need to illuminate this type of heroics versus the who the shooter was. And this gentleman, he said, I have a carry license. And when I was there with all the shooting, he said, I initially was going to, and I think he said, I was initially going to go out there and engage the hostile, but instead, he said, I noticed all these children. And he said, and at that point, his focus was to protect the children, to get as many children out there and save them out there and take them out of harm's way. And I think that was a really good example as far as humanity and the preservation of life. And this man said, he related it. He says, man, he almost started to get triggered. I don't know if you watched the actual interview or anybody else who's watched it out there out there in the audience, but if you saw, he had a little bit of a pause because he was talking about the war. He was talking about the war and how it had affected him, and in turn affected his what he did during this shooting. And I thought it was just amazing.
So is I just want to have the name out there. Was it Glendon Oakley Jr.?
Yes, yes.
So shout out to Glendon Oakley Jr. You have officially become hero status to us at Size Streams. So those are the kind of things we want to talk about. We want to talk about and
Mm-hmm.
make sure that things like that are getting the recognition that they're supposed to. Because something we brought up earlier was just the condition that we have of we only talk about the negative. We don't talk about the everyday amazing things that people do when they're faced with whether it's an ordinary situation of helping me get something down from the top shelf of
Mm-hmm.
a grocery store, or if it's
Right.
somebody who actually is going to put themselves in line in harm's way. The teachers that shield themselves against the students
Mm-hmm.
when situations happen, the first responders that show up and risk their own lives to rescue
Mm-hmm.
people. Those are the things that we need to be focusing on, not some scumbag's name.
Right. Right.
And yes, it's great to look at why he did it, but I feel like sometimes we get so fixated on the why, we stop paying attention to some of the better parts of humanity and looking at it and saying, hey, yes, this was horrible, but let's look at some of the good things that has happened of just people being human to each other.
Right. And it was really interesting. And I don't want. And I'm not doing this because I want to. You know. I'm not. I'm not doing to pulling people's emotional strings here. But I think this is worth talking about. Um, there was this young child, a newborn. Now, I can't remember the age of the child, but she had several broken bones um, at the ER from this mass shooting at El Paso, and they were trying to understand. Well, why does this child have all these broken bones, these type of injuries? They found out that the mother shielded the child with her body, and was killed, saving her child from getting shot, and so that the child got broken bones, but she didn't. The child didn't get shot, and so I think that is an example of how we can not only do that with our own children, but with other people, you know, where how.
Absolutely. And Serpent did make a good point though, especially when you're dealing with somebody who is licensed to carry or conceal carry. They teach you what to do, and sometimes the best course of action is not always to engage, but to protect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this gentleman in the El Paso shooting did, is he focused on the protection aspect rather than the engagement. And there's others that sometimes have the engagement. I'm wishing I would have looked it up before the stream started, but there was a situation only, I believe, a few months ago where a tragedy was prevented because somebody who was actually, I believe, a Marine interceded and stopped the situation because they had a concealed weapon on them that they could safely change the situation
Mm-hmm.
without causing any more harm to others. And so that's the thing is that we all want to be the heroes and stuff like that, but at the same time we also have to be smart heroes,
Yes.
and we have to do what's right, especially if you're dealing with police officers, when you're dealing with first responders, when you're dealing with the lives of those around you. Sometimes, as he put it, run and take as many people as you can with you,
Mm-hmm.
and just focus on the protection aspect.
Thank you for weighing in on that article and separate. Very good points you guys have been bringing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom. I appreciate you jumping in, bud. Yeah, it's just been really heartbreaking to, and again, that's why we felt that we need to kind of scrap what we were planning on talking about today, and
That's
just
crap. We're
really,
doing it next time.
well, postpone it. But anyhow, and I think, and I think that's this is we we're here and doing this for a reason, and Separate, you bring up a really good point that I want to talk about. I was in law enforcement when I was in the military. At least I did some of that when I was Bayside, and so we always talked about gun safety and all that other stuff, and we were taught it then, and it's still being talked about now. How police officers, they have to quickly assess the situation. And if you've got folks coming at you who have a gun in their hand and you're responding to an active shooting situation, that is, you're really putting that police officer or that sheriff officer right there is this guy friend or foe? Is this woman going to shoot me or is she going to help me? And so, for example, the gentleman who's been branded a hero, he actually had to explain to the officer, "I'm not the shooter." And after they he checked out, they let him, they let him go. So, Severin, you really talking about it is really important. You have to keep safety in mind. And if you're running up on, and if you're running out of a situation and you got your gun waving, but you got a concealed carry permit, think about what those law enforcement officers are going to have to try and assess in just a split second.
Absolutely. It's always important to make sure that you're not increasing the level of tragedy that's
Yeah.
happening in these situations or increasing the chaos. So it's some of these things are just amazing, and it is definitely a difficult subject for Matt and I to get into, given our personal experience. And I know that a lot of people, the stuff I've been seeing online mostly has just been, well, I'm now afraid. I don't feel like I
Mm-hmm.
can let my children go anywhere without me, or I don't feel that I'm safe going somewhere. And I know that, coming from a personal place, I was just at a Target, 2 days ago with my sister and little niece that's part of a mall. And all I can think is, oh my gosh, what would happen if that situation happened? And I'm this next week, I have kind of a little mini vacation going to like a baseball game and Universal Studios. And all I can think is, wow, these are really public places. And it's scary. It's something that's personally very frightening to me
Mm-hmm.
to think about. And I think that that's something that is just so unfortunate when these things happen is, you have this cultural aspect where people start to blame. You have this aspect where people start to try to figure out why. And so they're either going to blame the identity of the person, whether it's cultural, racial, religious, or they're going to start to blame other things like video games, which I promised we would talk about, which I think is kind of what we need to start doing now.
Yeah.
Um, or they're going to start looking at these other aspects. And I think that for us, we start to have this fear of, well, what does it mean for us in our lives? We want to make sense of it where there is no sense to be made. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of the people that are right now weighing in and watching these situations, they don't really know what to do now.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So what do we do now?
We're going to talk about video games. How about it? All right.
Yeah, that's, by the way, that's something for anybody who's been paying attention to the news. That's something that's been discussed.
Yes.
And it's discussed in almost after every single thing. Every time there's a tragedy, the first things people go to are movies and video games, gun control laws, and
Mental
then they
health.
start, and then race, religion, personal identity. Those are the things we've already talked about, kind of the race, religion, identity, and all that stuff. So and we've kind of talked a little bit about the guns. That does get a little political, so there's a reason we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
skirting around it a little bit. So the other thing though that gets blamed is entertainment and things like video games. So Matt, I know this is something you really specifically want to talk about.
Yeah. It's and to be point, and they were directed exactly at video games. They weren't talking about board games. They weren't talking about anything other than the violent video games that are out there or have been out there for decades. I can't. It was the party leader. I can't remember his name. Doesn't matter. He basically said, video games. We've got to look at how video games have a serious negative impact on desensitizing or dehumanizing people so that they will go and easily go out there and kill people. We have to take a look at that. Well, buddy, they have done that. They have done that for a very long time now. And it is, once again, the science hasn't changed. There is no correlation between somebody playing a first person shooter like Fallout or Battlefield and wanting to commit, mass murder without any regards to human life. There isn't one.
And I
And
think that it brings back to what you said. I'm sorry, I'm over here just trying not to face palm at this.
mm-hmm,
It comes back to what you were talking about is I would love to know how many veterans grew up playing video games or enjoyed playing video games while they were on deployment, yet still had issues when they came home based on the different things they had to be forced to do out in the field. based on whatever the current climate was for if it was war Iraq. I'm trying to think of what the word is. I just cannot come up with complex words today. So, I just love to see where that research is. We're only
Yeah.
looking at things like these kids in Columbine, they played video games and then they shot up a school. Why are we not looking at things like, with your example, this is again a revelation I'm just having
Mm-hmm.
because this is something that I had not heard your perspective until this stream that we did. Is what about that? What about that idea of where combat veterans are coming back? And I mean, we're being hosted up by Stack Up right now. What about you guys? Did any of you ever, play a video game and feel desensitized in a war situation? I'd love to know your answers to that.
Right, and while that's coming in, I'm going to talk about my experiences. I mean, when I was in Iraq, I had my PlayStation 2, and I was playing video games as just a way to de-stress from the long shifts or whatever craziness that was thrown our way. I didn't really play shooters unless you count Final Fantasy. I played Final Fantasy. I loved it.
Awesome.
But you know, I just don't see how somebody with, well, Renegade, you said it the best. It said it's a scapegoat
Yep.
to
Yep.
avoid talking about the real problem. Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I think most veterans have played video games, and it's they're just, it doesn't have an impact. It has a positive impact, but it doesn't have a negative impact where that person feels more prone to committing acts of violence against communities. I just don't. It's impossible. And you know, I, yeah, we can talk about dehumanizing and desensitizing in the military, and that is a thing. That is absolutely a thing. But it's, you still have the traumatic impact of what happened. It just allows you to survive in the moment and what you're doing in that moment, I would say.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my husband is currently right now, this second, playing Overwatch. And although I can guarantee that the toxicity of the people that he's playing with can definitely have an impact on his mental health as far as whether or not he is happy with current society or not. Anyone who's ever played Overwatch and has dealt with the toxicity, you know exactly what I mean. At the same time, I highly doubt that this is anything that is going to be desensitizing him. And we're getting people that are actually, by the way, those who are going to be watching this later and not watching chat. And I'm not going to read everybody's comments because yes, these are people actually talking about war
Mm-hmm.
experiences and playing video games and how they've never gone out and committed a mass terrorist act or a mass shooting or a tragedy in general. So I'm not going to give shout outs to all that, but at the same time, I do want to point out that we're getting people who are saying, hey, I've played this for years and I was in the military and it has still affected me. And so that's just, I think that this is what we really need to be looking at in life, is just in our research. And this is things like what Matt's bringing up with the combat veterans and playing video games. And there's so much benefit. We're reading here a lot of different
Yeah.
things about it being a stress relief, about it having, helping them maybe feel. I know I've talked to people in the past about it helping them feel close to loved ones while they were being deployed because they could talk to their. I know ones who have played with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
While I was still able to play Overwatch with my son, even though I was on deployment.
It was really interesting when I was at the bone marrow unit for my transplant. I had spent almost well over a month when I was there, but video games gave me a break. It didn't give me a break from the pain and all that other stuff. What it did do was gave me a mental break because I was literally stuck in a very small room with only 1 hour where I can go outside of my room and be outside and get some fresh air. I almost felt like, I felt like I was in a jail. But I had my laptop, my gaming laptop, so I was able to play games with my wife. I was able to play games with my friends, or just play a game on my own and just give myself that escape, that mental break. And it's very, to me, it's very reminiscent of playing video games while I was deployed. It just gave me that break that I needed to just escape the BS for just a little while. You know?
Yeah, and I think Strike makes a good point. I wouldn't say impossible per se. I think a person already on that path of being desensitized and radicalized, really, I can't talk, can absolutely indulge in that in problem by playing games or anything else to use as escapism. So
Absolutely.
that's such a good point, and I think that that brings back up to our idea that, but it's still one. It's an individual. We're talking about an individual. We're not talking about a community. And, when we're talking about video games, when we're starting to say, hey, well, yeah, that person also played video games, and that's why they did that. That person also is a Christian. That person's a Muslim. That person is black. They're white. They're Hispanic. Whatever label you want to put on that person, you can say almost anything. Is that, well, that person represents a community
Mm-hmm.
and or mental health, because we've talked about mental health as well, that we want to say that that represents a community when in reality it doesn't. Now, could there be factors? Could mental health be a factor? Could video games be maybe a catalyst that somebody does use in desensitization based on other factors such as mental health? Absolutely, we're not
Mm-hmm.
denying, but I think that's what's so important is we need to, as a society, stop generalizing. We
Yes.
need to stop saying all men, all women, all white people, all video game players, all veterans, all anything. You take it, put a label in there, whatever you want to have. We have to stop that all statements. And this is something that I think that if we can start doing that and start stepping back and saying, okay, so what is the actual problem here? And maybe what are some of the different aspects that added to that problem? And I'm gonna go to a Shrek quote. We have layers. We are onions.
We're
We
complicated.
all have layers.
We're a little bit more complicated than just a generalization. That's how I like to
Absolutely.
say it, and it's true because we always talk about you'll hear the reference the poster boy. What is the poster boy of the average gamer of Overwatch? Well, if we were to take a look at the negative aspects of the game, then it looks like some really pissed off angst little dude that's got a chip on their shoulders and they're you know but that doesn't work. It's not a true representation. That's like all the people who said that, and the researchers back in the day who said that veterans are poorly educated, they are poor in general, they are abusive in their relationships, they abuse drugs, they abuse alcohol. I'm like, holy shit, are you
I've
really gonna
literally
say all that?
never heard that.
In my psych class, this was back in during my undergrad, it was a Psych 101 class. It was just a general book that had it had a part about it with PTSD. So of course they talked about veterans. Well, they referenced a study that was done back in 1980, and this was 2010 when I was taking this class. No, 2009, and they said that they literally said a generalized statement about veterans, and I was furious, and so I wrote to the professor saying, "You need to take a consideration of some of the stuff that's in this book because this is terrible, terrible." Sorry. So it was just like, yeah, we can't do that, and it's called Rubik sizing.
Yeah.
When we overgeneralize a thing, a person, or even an experience when it comes to the people that we interact with. I did a huge report on that and lecture for the VA. Maslow, he said that if we were to walk into a situation with a clear mind, with no preconceived notions about that person based off of their skin color, the way they look, or any of that other stuff, and come there with a genuine curiosity to know the person, our society would be in a much better place.
Absolutely. Strike mate brings up the neckbeard stereotype. Everyone
Uh,
who wears trench coats is a Columbine shooter. Everyone in Florida is on meth. Yeah, I don't know, Strike, if you were here earlier, but my experience is I was actually in high school when Columbine happened, and I hung out with a group during my senior year that were goths, ravers, We called ourselves the Wall. It was a group and pretty awesome, amazing people. I didn't fit in. I was the preppy of the group. I came from a different high school and had a Letterman jacket. But they were the nicest people on the face of the planet. And they actually used to be, yeah, they used to be called Columbine kids just because of the way they would dress. And so, yeah, those stereotypes are just, they're so damaging. And I know everybody loves the Florida man stories because they are so crazy, but we have to realize that
Yeah.
it's a dangerous thing to start assuming these things
Mm-hmm.
when we start to think that I'm going to go back to, everybody who is, I mean, anything you do that, anybody who is an immigrant is illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who is from the Middle East is a terrorist. Anybody who has purple hair is I get called social justice warrior, which is, by the way, the literally the furthest thing from the truth. I'm
Yeah.
going to go out and say that right now. I am seriously not a social justice warrior, but because I have purple hair, everyone assumes that. And so these are things that when we look at people or we start stereotyping people, we make these judgments about them. And I know this is, everybody here knows this. We all know what a judgment is, and we all
Mm-hmm.
know that making them is bad. But for some reason, as a society, we still do it. And it's things like this, it's these tragedies, and all you're going to hear, and that's the thing is that we are coming up to about a half an hour, 40 minutes left.
Yeah.
So we are going to get into making sure we're talking about like solutions. And one of those things is to just make sure that as we're looking at this, realize that as you're going through social media, you're going to be seeing a lot about this person. You're going to be seeing his political beliefs, his religious beliefs, his skin color, the way he was raised. You're going to see all these things about him that are going to try to paint a picture to make you believe that this is the type of person that does these tragedies.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, though, is that if you look at every single situation differently, you're going to see that there's always a different motivation. And yes, by the way, a lot of people who commit these tragedies, they're going to be white men. Guess what? We also have the largest population of Caucasians. This is where they are. We have, or this is where, the Caucasian population is the largest in America. It is. That's what we have the majority of. So yes, you're going to see that there's going to be a higher likelihood of some of these things happening. You're going to see that men, I don't know if you know this, men make up 50% of the population, just in case you didn't know. There's men and there's women. There are 50% of them. So there's going to be a very high likelihood that they're going to have some similarities that people are going to try to say, this is why he played video games. He did this, he did that, he has this upbringing, he has this belief. And one of the things I want to make sure that just as kind of a how we're dealing with this as a society is we're looking at that and saying just because those things might be part of who his identity is, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't apply to everybody who also has a similar identity. That
And
is his identity.
and before we run out of time to talk about it, I just want to wrap one. I want to give everybody who's listening this idea or this thought because I think it's safe to say that most of the folks who are with us today play video games, play games in general, and so they see the benefit of games. Um, I'm going to offer you this idea or this thought. Okay, so the people who are the ones who criticize video games and gaming in general, um, I think why would the CDC be investing money into Stack Up if there wasn't a benefit of gaming in the gaming community?
That's a
Uh,
wonderful point.
why why would the AAS and the VA invest money into gaming to help out veterans, to help out their mental health? And why would the AAS invite us on a panel to talk about the good of gaming if this was all bad? So you got to take into consideration, folks, who are you listening to, and and what are they basing those opinions off of? And and I when I hear people who are the naysayers, they're almost a walking contradiction. And so just if you're getting flack for it, you can just say, hey, the federal government is funding programs that are based off of gaming. What do you have to say to that? you know?
Yeah, and then use Matt's example of, the veterans who come back and they're still having a hard time after, whatever they've done in combat, and they're still actually struggling with those things of just the people's basic ideas. We don't want to hurt each other. And I think that's just, if there's any takeaway, I think, from this whole thing is, as we're going to get over this as a society and as a culture and as a country, and we're going to start to look past this, because like I said already, is I myself am dealing with my own sense of fear of leaving the house, of going to these populated areas, of wondering, wow, somebody could do that. But that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing, that every day people go into populated areas. Every day people come home just fine. It's the individual that comes through and then changes that world for these people. But at the same time, it can't keep us from living our own lives, because it is not the norm. This is an outlier. This is a tragedy for a reason. It's a tragedy because it shouldn't be common. And it's not common. Yes, we have been plagued by it this week. We have Gilroy, and we have El Paso, and we have Dayton, and our hearts are out to everybody who is dealing with this and those communities, or those who have ties within those communities. We care about you a great deal, and we do have the utmost sympathy and empathy for what you are going through. But at the same time, we have to remember that those are not the norm, and we
Mm-hmm.
need to go out just like the video gamer who also happens to commit a atrocious act. That is not a norm. That is an outlier. And the video games didn't make him do it. It's There's something else. There's those catalysts within us, the same way I talked about having the addiction that runs in my family. But if I never partake in those substances, I'm also not going to be an addict. So there's always something else that has to lie. And a lot of that does come down to mental health. And it doesn't mean that if you have a mental health issue, you are going to be a terrorist, you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
a, a mass shooter, you are going to do these things. Just because you have a mental health issue does not mean that's who you are. But at the same time, breaking the stigma of mental health and allowing people who do need that help is so important.
You know, article has said something that's really I hear you. And he says, "I've always said you never know who the jerk is at a bar until he is the jerk at the bar. Doesn't stop you from going, right? Yeah,
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, and I'm trying to keep up because we've had a lot of comments.
yeah. A lot of good weighing in on this, folks. I really appreciate it. This is exactly why we're doing this, so that you folks can get your word out, get your thoughts out, and everybody can just kind of weigh in on it and talk about it. So I really appreciate it.
I'm going to go back a little bit. Serpent said, they take all the points from one bad person's past. They say that's the cause. They can
Mm-hmm.
turn that right around and take that generic profile, match it to billions of people that have even gotten a seatbelt ticket or haven't even gotten a seatbelt ticket in their life. And that's absolutely true. I'm pretty sure that if you were to look at some of the typical the people who do these things, unfortunately, somebody in several people in my family would probably fit the profile because they're gamers, they're
Mm-hmm.
white, they're men, they're Christian. That's something that that fits, unfortunately, a lot of people. And I can tell you right now, from my family and my husband's family, these are wonderful, upstanding people who would never again even get a seatbelt ticket. I've got
Mm-hmm.
Marines in my family, firemen in my family, different people who actually have made it their job to help people,
Yeah.
not hurt people, yet somehow those people still fit that stereotype based on checking off a few boxes that people want to say are the causes, such as video games, race, religion, and so on.
Right. It's I joke about it with friends and family before. You know, I'm a Iraqi war veteran. I drive a a nice, very fast Challenger muscle car with a big
Oh,
old
that's awesome.
Hemi, and so my one of the first things that people will say to me, well, how many speeding tickets have you got? I was like, I've never gotten one. I've never gotten a speeding ticket. And I'm not saying I don't speed. I just never been caught.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Going there.
yeah. But it's funny because it's an example of people think that if you are A, B, and C, well then you are this, and they just kind of assume that.
Well, I mean, people, I've given this example in streams in the past is one of the things when I was working at the high school, the first thing I would do when I met a new class is I would teach them about stereotypes right up front by saying, what kind of music do you think I listen to? And yes, this is before the purple hair. People's perception of me has changed a little bit in the last 6 months. But, I have auburn hair. I was born with the prissiest name on the face of the planet. My maiden name is Hannah Serene Smiley. You really don't get prissier than that. Auburn hair, freckles. I mean, yeah, everyone thought my favorite music was country. Um, and that was, I mean, it was hands down. I don't think I ever had, I think I had one kid joke about being like, you like Metallica, don't you? And I was like, actually, I just went to a concert. And they're like, wait, no, seriously? They had no clue because I actually listen to mostly rock. I mean, I do like all types of music. I've been on a musical kick lately. By the way, Hadestown musical music is actually really amazing if you haven't heard of it. So that's a little plug for that show. But I listen to pretty much everything, but I love rock. So if you want to know what is 95% of the time on my playlist, it's going to be everything from Disturbed, Avenged Sevenfold, 3 Days Grace. They're going to be, Hailstorm is my favorite band of all times. I've seen them multiple times in concert. Metallica. That's kind of where my world lives. But based on the stereotypes, I fit into this very prissy. Everyone thinks that I have this perfect little upbringing. Of course, my parents are married and happy, and I grew up with a picket fence and 2 3 siblings and a cat and a dog, and that's exactly how my life was. And then when they find out I was actually raised in an abusive home, I dealt with a lot of gang violence in my neighborhood. I dealt with all these different things in my life. People are absolutely shocked because they look at me and say, well, you don't look that way. You don't look like you fit that stereotype. And I think that's kind of the issue here is that just because some of these people do fit what we want to put them in a box to say that they fit, gamers or whatever,
Yeah.
mental health and all that, that doesn't mean that that's what the rest of us are.
Well,
And so there's
let me
that
ask you
difference.
this:
Uh-huh.
do you listen to Tool?
Oh yeah.
Yes. I'm just
Are you
checking.
kidding?
They got the big album coming out at the end of the month. They're just making sure.
Oh, I should actually one of these days I should see if I can find it. There's a one of my friends actually did a Final Fantasy all the cutscenes and then overlaid it with a Tool song, and it's probably one of the coolest things I could ever find.
Oh, that
So
would
I
be
might have to search for it, and
yes.
I wish I could remember what song it is. I actually can't. I'm apologizing of that. It's amazing. I just remember this. This was back in high school, so
Hell
I'll
yeah.
have to see if somebody has it or if they ever uploaded it to YouTube for you because you just die. It's amazing.
That would be sweet. Okay, so wrapping up, getting into it, let's talk about some resources. And I know you have a ton out there. Let's go ahead and jump into that. What do you have for the audience?
So here's the thing: is that one of the things that I get a lot of people saying is, "What can we do now?" I've seen
Mm-hmm.
this on Facebook of people doing call of arms of saying, "Do something good."
Yeah.
Get out there, do something good for society, make the world a better place. What can you do? Um, wow, somebody just said they don't like Hailstorm. You and I have issues. I'm sorry.
I've
I just
never heard of Hailstorm.
Hailstorm is awesome. I've seen them open for. I got to go to a festival where they're opening for like Disturbed and Avenged Sevenfold and Stone Sour, and it was amazing. Love Hailstorm. I've met them, but anyways, I highly recommend. It's essentially she kind of has this very heart slash the Runaways vibe going on with
Mm.
her voice, so she can do that. But the music itself is a little bit more on lines to things like Disturb or Avenged Sevenfold or 3 Days Grace. So kind of that modernized, but her voice is very that old 80s hair band rock, female rocker thing. Super awesome. Anyways, back to what we can do to help in our society. That was a plug for Hailstorm, and if they ever watch my videos, and so one of the things that is a great suggestion of something that you can do to help is give blood.
Mm-hmm.
I recently gave blood, even though I really shouldn't be doing it because my iron is pretty low. Is they are actually having a blood shortage. There's actually a shortage of blood. For those who didn't know that that was possible, it is absolutely possible. As they're dealing with all of these different tragedies, their sources of blood are actually starting to get diminished. So this is something, please, if you are able or capable to give blood, obviously those of you who have medical conditions and cannot give blood, please take care of yourself and don't worry about it. But for those of you who can, I am really highly, highly, highly recommending that you go out, whether it is your local blood bank. I go to San Diego Blood Bank, which is right here by my house, or whether it is the Red Cross or any of these other organizations that do blood donations. If you have the time, set up something for a platelet donation that can help people who are dealing with diseases. Make it a regular thing. If you are somebody who's able to give blood, I really just implore you with all my heart to do so, because there are so many people in need who can use platelet transfusions, who can use the blood donations for things such as these different tragedies. And I would hate to get to the point where people are actually losing their lives when these tragedies happen due to the fact that there's not enough blood stores. And as we've had three in the last week,
Mm-hmm.
of over 30 currently dead, and I don't even know what the numbers are right now of wounded. There are, I believe there was almost 40 for just one of them. And so we're talking about probably approaching 100 people who have been wounded and another 30 who plus who have died. They're starting to deplete the stores even more. So this is my call to action for the blood bank, the San Diego Blood Bank, the Red Cross, whatever your local branch is. Please, please, please go out and give blood. That is my first thing. I will have links up there of how you can participate in giving blood and what your donation of blood could mean to those who are actually struggling. I believe that they say one donation can save up to 7 lives. And so that is something that can be so important. Your gift of blood can go such a long way. The second thing that we are going to be pushing for people to do is, if you have the financial ability to go and donate to one of the GoFundMe pages.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to, full disclosure here, I do have ties to GoFundMe. I do know people who work there. I have met the people who run the company. And so I do not want, if that comes out, to be seen as something that I am pushing because of a personal agenda. Full disclosure is I do have ties to the company. However, that being said, I do strongly believe in the company. I believe in what they do. I have met the CEOs. I have met the people who have founded the company. I have met the people who work for the company. I am friends with those who work within trust and safety, who work within the IT department, who work within the customer service, or as they call them, happiness. I have been in the office. I know these people directly and personally, and they are genuinely good people. And one of the things that GoFundMe does is they offer a tip option for when you are giving your donation, which means that, hey, if you're saying, you know what, I don't want GoFundMe to take any piece of my donation, you don't have to. You can put on there a 0% tip. Nothing additional will be taken from your fund. And other than payment processing, they do not
Mm-hmm.
have their own payment processor. So, yes, remember that if you are using a credit card, obviously there's going to be a payment processor that is going to be involved as well. So just a reminder there. But GoFundMe has set up a hub for the Gilroy shootings that has an actual, where they are all approved and sponsored sites and campaigns. And you can find that. We will be linking that in our Facebook as well as our Twitter later on. And so if you want to help donate to Gilroy, I know that El Paso has actually set up a general fund because the impact has been so large with so many people being affected, that these are funds that will go and being distributed to everybody. So it's not just going to be one family. If there's a family that you would like to donate to directly, that's fantastic. But these general funds are run through GoFundMe. They are approved, they have been vetted, and they will be going to everybody to help with funeral expenses, medical expenses. As far as Dayton, I do not have an update yet for a general fund or a hub. I do, however, know for a fact that they are working on it. But since it only happened today, it is a Sunday. Their staff, it does have the weekend off. Yes, they do take the weekends off. Unfortunately, it may be a day or two until I can get that up and um, available to everybody. But if you have the financial resources, I do highly recommend going to GoFundMe and checking out some of their sites. They have amazing love for the community and what they do, and the it is safe. We usually say do not donate to a campaign that you do not know directly. However, when you're dealing with these larger hubs or these ones that are the general funds, they are actually double, triple, quadruple checked. All of the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, and GoFundMe offers a guarantee that if the funds are mismanaged and it is found out, they do not only refund all of the money to those who have donated, but they also still try to make sure that those who are in need still get their money. So they do a gives back program every month where they actually give part of their own money, and rather than putting it in profit, they put it back in the pockets of those who are dealing with different tragedies in their own lives. I do not have confirmation whether or not any of the gives back will go towards any of these tragedies yet, but I would not be surprised if there wasn't something that was set up in the future. So please, that is another thing you can do is you
Mm-hmm.
can go and give to GoFundMe, any of the different funds. Matt is not aware of this, but we are also going to be offering for our Patreon. By the way, Matt, our Patreon, any donations that we get on our Patreon during the next 2 weeks until between now and our next stream is going to be directly donated to GoFundMe as well. We are not asking for you to set up recurring Patreon supports. If you would like to only set up a single Patreon donation and then cancel your Patreon right after that so you don't get charged the following month, that is completely fine. We will not be offended at that at all. But anything that we receive on our Patreon for the next 2 weeks is going to be also going to the GoFundMe generalized campaigns, whichever ones look like they need the most help. If those campaigns have reached their full funds, we will be donating those funds into mental health programs that are also put on GoFundMe. So that is our wonderful ways you can help. And finally, talk about it, support each
Yes.
other, love each
Yes.
other, get those stigmas out there that, or break those stigmas that are out there. If you hear somebody saying, oh, that video game player, that white boy, or that whatever, make sure that you are just obviously with love, do it with kindness. Don't throw anything at anybody or start cussing anybody out. We don't want to spread hate. But if you see somebody who is overgeneralizing or
Mm-hmm.
doing any of the things that we have talked about in this stream that we seriously advise you don't do, please say something, speak up, educate, bring it up, say, hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe that's not the problem. Maybe it's not that. Maybe we need to look at how this or that are working, or maybe we just need to have some love. Let's look at the positive things. If you're seeing things that are on the news or you're getting things on your Facebook feed or Twitter feed or whatever social media you use, and it is in any way glorifying the people who have committed these atrocious acts, don't share it.
Mm-hmm.
Share the good stories. Get the positive stories out there so that we can remember that we are all human.
And exactly, and keep the dialogue open. Keep the conversation moving. Keep it moving forward. We had a lot of amazing input today from the folks watching, and if we were to take this and keep it moving forward, I think that's what's going to help. At least it's going to be in the right direction as far as what we can do in our country or as a community or on a global presence, because we were talking not just about America but just other countries as well. And this is where it starts. Everyone said it, chiming in, breaking these stigmas, learning more about the cultural differences and understanding about it rather than having these preconceived ideas about it. That's where it starts. That's where we can move forward. And I want to, you were talking about, Hannah, talking about people on Twitter. You get these They joke about them. They call them keyboard warriors. I think it's important to educate people if you can. You know, if they're over glorifying the shooter, you know, or for example, don't start your response to their tweet with "Hey asshole," because that's just going to automatically shut them down, right? You know, you got to have a little bit of tact when you do that rather than coming off a little bit too strong. So I say that
Absolutely.
it was an extreme joke or an extreme example, but I'm seeing that happening right now with the Ohio shootings and all that other stuff. You have to you don't want people to shut themselves off to what you have to say right off the get go. So be out there, be an advocate for mental health, be an advocate for what is right for the country, what is right for society. Just maybe not swear so much or piss them off, and then at the same time.
And don't throw anything. If somebody is being mean in a Starbucks, just enjoy your frappuccino and just show them some love. They don't need to have be wearing your frappuccino for the rest of the day just because you don't like what they said. So you've got to definitely be handling all of this in love, and it's so hard for us to sit here and we get angry too, and we
Oh
want to
yeah.
we want to scream and yell, and sometimes you just have to look at them and say, well, I don't agree with what you say, but I love you anyway. And you have to just start with what you can do, and the things that you can do, um, donating to our these different tragedies, whether it is through blood donations or financially. And this by the way, this advice is what always applies. This is always something. This is not something that is just today or tomorrow. If it is something that's within your means to continue to give blood or to continue to support people through donations, through things like GoFundMe. Unfortunately, tragedies will always be a real part of our lives. This is something that we're not going to get to go away overnight. This is a situation that we have to start looking at piece by piece, and just making sure that what we're doing is we always have to look at things logically.
Yes.
We can't just look at things and say this is all one way or all that way, or I wish we could do this like this other country or this other person, because the fact of the matter is that it's not always apples to apples when you're looking at those situations. So we have to remember, well, what's the logical solution, and start looking at that. And I know that a lot of people can get frustrated as we're going to start seeing a lot of things about ban all guns. We're going to start
Mm-hmm.
seeing things about ban video games, regulate this, regulate that. We're going to start seeing other people that are pushing back and saying that's not the problem. It's this other issue that's the issue. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Republicans' fault. It's the men's fault. It's the mother's fault. It's everybody's fault. We're going to start seeing that.
Yep.
And I just ask that everybody kind of takes a step back and looks at the situation logically, and well, what can we do? And some of the things we can do is we can spread the love. We can make sure that when people are hurting, that we're reaching out to them. We can.
Look what Strike said. He said instead of saying to yourself, "What a weirdo," if you see someone struggling, ask, "What's wrong?" There you go.
Love that. Exactly. What's
Perfect.
going on in their life? My husband likes to joke. He'll look at me and go, like, if someone's being a jerk, he'll be like, who hurt you? But I mean, he says that jokingly, but in reality, sometimes that can be true, is somebody just might be hurting.
Mm-hmm.
There may just be something wrong. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't understand. And we have to start taking that mentality of what education can we provide? What support can we provide? In my last job, one of the things my boss would always do is whenever she would come in the room and we'd see her for the day and we were obviously stressed out, is she would look at us and say, how can I support you today?
Nice.
And it
Nice.
never was then a, hey, you look really bad and tired and stressed out. It was just a, how can I support you today? She could tell that there was stuff going on, but she never came across as, oh my gosh, can't you just suck it up? Or, oh, you look so bad today. It was always on that positive note of, how can I support you?
Well, you know, and this circles right back to the beginning of what we were talking about when it comes to some of these shootings. You never know. Reaching out to that person who clearly looks like they're under distress, um, you might give them that way out. They might have been at that brink where they said, I am now going to take harmful action not only to myself but to others. Maybe by extending them human kindness, they'll say it could have prevented them from taking those actions. You just never know. If people are saying who are part of these shootings saying they were just looking for a way out, you can could very well possibly be that way out for them. You never know.
Yeah, you never know what's going through somebody's head, especially in social media. And I think that's
Yep.
something that Matt and I have dealt with in the past. That he's had to deal with me being like, "Why are people so mean on Twitter when I'm on our Size Streams account, but nice to me when I'm on my personal account?" It's well, on Size Streams, I'm Size Streams. I'm not an individual, and I think we can forget that there's a person behind that keyboard. And so again, sometimes they may just not know. If we're talking about something logically, just say, "Hey, well, I'd love to hear your solution. What is your solution? How can we work this out? That's not my opinion, but what's your idea?"
Mm-hmm.
And learn from each other, educate each other. If you see something that whether we share or somebody else shares that you look at and go, "Wow, this is a really good logical point of some real actions we can take to help minimize these either effects afterwards, like we are dealing with now, or help in some way add some prevention in the future," share that.
Mm-hmm.
you know get that education out there, get the positive out there, spread the word about what people, if you're seeing people say, "Well, what can I do to help?" Share those links.
Yep. And let's start. And I think we're getting close to wrapping it up for the day. I think we really covered. We could talk more. There's more we can discuss about it. But I think in about the 2 hours that we've spent, we really have come up with a lot of really good information from the audience. Absolutely, you guys really just kicked some serious ass today. Really appreciate what everyone was saying. I really think this is what it takes. This is the start of it. We just have to keep moving forward, and it's well. I'm very curious to see how the country as a whole is going to respond, and we're going to see that fairly soon. Um,
Seeing it.
I think we're seeing it right now. There's going to be some kind of action that's going to be took. I just really hope it's the right one for the country and not something that's just going to add more to the suffering that's already happening right now. Um, but once again, just kind of me signing off for this. It's been a very good conversation, a very emotional conversation. I always joke about this. I know I've had a really good side stream. If I have a little bit of a headache by the time I'm done, and I got a pretty good sized one coming up. So I think it was very informative, very knowledgeable, and again, thank you everybody for weighing in on this. We'll continue to talk about the stuff when it's needed, and just share. If you can share this with your friends, if you feel that if you took some kind of value from what we did today for the last 2 hours, please share that. That's going to help too, not just to support us, but to push the mental health agenda, to destigmatize mental health and the concerns that come along with it. And share the clip, share the link, or whatever that you feel good, comfortable doing. We appreciate it because that's just how we get the word out. So Hannah, what do you got?
So yeah, so our social media, please go to our Twitter or our Facebook. Both are going to have Size Streams. That's how you can find us. PSI and then streams. That's where you're going to find all the links for today. We're going to have those different links up for the different GoFundMe campaigns, information about how you can give blood, what your blood donation could mean to other people, as well as we get more information about some of the stuff that's coming in about some of these different tragedies. We'll be trying to share some of those information with you, especially when we see the positive. We're going to practice what we preach, and we're going to share the positive as well and get that information out there. So please check us out on Facebook or Twitter. You can also check out me on my Facebook, my Twitter, or my website. That's going to be under Serene Life Consulting. Everything is linked. Everything is all nice and integrated. If you find one, you're going to find all of it. So please check it out. And as far as like our YouTube, please subscribe, share this clip, this video. I do not think I'm going to be splitting up into
Yeah.
chapters like I've done in the past, just because this is kind of one of those subjects that I feel like if you need it, you need it. You need all
Mm-hmm.
of it. But we do ask that you talk to your friends, because people are not going to be very interested in watching a 2 hour video. And so, say, hey, just don't even listen, just turn off the video and just listen to it auto, with audio over the next few drives on their way to or from work or whatever. Any sort of information you can help get this video specifically out there would be fantastic, because it's not going to be as accessible as we usually are, because I'm not going to be splitting it up into chapters. And with our YouTube, I don't know if we have the link, but our YouTube is, you just look up, I believe it's Serene Life Consulting and Sci Streams. I apologize, it is long. You can also find a link to it though from either a Twitter or a Facebook, or my own Twitter or my Facebook. So again, everything's integrated. And just before we leave, I just want to make sure that we are telling everybody out there in Gilroy, in El Paso, and in Dayton, we are with you in mind, body, and soul as much as we can be. We are sending you our love, we're sending you our thoughts, we're sending you our prayers, and we are just really hoping that whatever you guys are
Mm-hmm.
going through right now in that community, that you rebuild and you become stronger than you were before. So to
Yes.
all the
Yes.
victims and the families of the victims and the friends that are dealing with this right now, we love you, we care about you, and we support you.
Yes. Thank you. All right, folks. That's all we have for today. There we go. We got the sign off of the heart hands, the serious heart hands. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Keep your eyes peeled for our next stream. Everybody, please take care of each other.
And
Take
don't forget to love each other.
Yeah, take care of each other and love each other. We'll see you later. Bye.